welcome to Akulmac Business Channel. And today in this program, we have a very special guest, Mr. Sitesh Srivastava, and with whom we will be discussing about one of the very important topic, and topic is responsible state and welfare. So without wasting any further moment, I would like to call Mr. Sitesh Srivastava and start this important and interesting discussion.
Okay, welcome Sitesh to this show, and how are you doing today?
I'm well, and all the well, more energized always to talk to you.
Lovely, and we have selected a very interesting topic today regarding welfare states and responsible states. So before I go further, I would also want to really understand for our viewers' sake that what you mean when you're talking about responsible state and welfare state.
Well, Kanchan, in the modern demographic setup after post-industrialized world in the 19th and the 20th century, we have seen different kinds of states that have come up after the medieval stages and the colonial stages. And these states which came out in the 19th century, we found they were based on the democratic principles. They were more about referendums. They were more about people's participation. And there were several other flavors of socialism, capitalism, communism, and other isms.
Mm-hmm.
And in between, there were experimental states as well. And therefore, each state and the concept of each state was about a welfare for their people to advance the thought process of that nation or a country or a community or a tribe. And therefore, social welfare was an important part of each of these state experiments, whether democracy, whether presidential form of government or a prime ministerial form of government, legislative, reporting to the monarchy, everything. And therefore, the responsible state is a state which is also socially responsible and committed towards social welfare. So we cannot separate them basically. They are together.
Well, when we are talking about welfare states and a responsible state, and I would like to really ask you that every state in this present world, most of them are responsible and welfare states. Maybe a monarchy, they are look forward for welfare. Even when we go back in our Indian history, we'll find all kings and queens, they were more directed towards doing welfare. And when we talk about modern age, and when you talk about welfare and establishing only the welfare institution, somehow this provides equality, right, to all the citizens. But at the same time, this also speaks about socialism more than right of freedom, which is on topmost in many of the countries like India. Also, we cherish and we want to be free, and there are half of the population who is really working towards socialism. But most of the people in India, they talk about freedom. So how really you gel these ideas, though socialism, though I mean the welfare is the a mantra for any rule or in any country of the world, but still it's echoes about socialism. So how you would like to elaborate on that?
Kanchan, it's the same kitchen. It's the same ingredients. What the culinary tastes can be different. The ingredients of a preparation could be different. And then while we, see people working in the kitchens, we develop a certain taste, the certain platter of food across the cultures, across communities, and across nations. Why on earth would we have a Chinese food, whereas I know that Chinese food could be, a very much big variety, and then we have the Indian Chinese food. Similarly, for the states to exist in modern world, Kanchan, they have to have a welfare agenda. But the welfare agenda of each different kind of a state is differently, prepared differently, executed differently, is addressed and targeted at different kind of an audience. So, for example, if I see, today in the Chinese kind of setup, on the outer look, it's a communism, but under that communism, a lot of capitalism flourishes. That's where we see China, what China is today, and of course they have their own social welfare policies. If we look at the African nations, especially the poorer African nations, most of the welfare is happening through the governments. Very few is the participation from the public, and that makes the burden on the government and the exchequer more, where the participation is only one way. In the Indian context, if we talk in terms of the Manrega scheme or other schemes, PM, Jan Dhan Yojana, and couple of other, Anganwadi we have known for ages. Right? These are mostly participatory programs. The government funds are released, the schemes are released, and then they are monitored and gauged how successful they have been. Not all the policies by the government has been successful across the country in every state. So the social welfare is something like a culinary dish that the ruling dispensation of each country has to decide, agree in their parliament or assemblies, which is good for that particular country, and that's how it has to be proposed, isn't it?
Yes, but I also want you to elaborate what are those characteristics or features when we are talking about the welfare state and when we talk about responsible government. Because responsibility, people are responsible, and when they are ruling any country, but how they really provide these stages of welfare to their common people of their country.
Kanchan, if you remember, in our Indian country, we had census every 10 years, and then we also used to have 5-year plan, the Panchvarshiya Yojana, which is now known as Niti Aayog, Planning Commission. These were the institutions over the decades, not just years. Over the decades, they planned and designed different social welfare programs to be taken over towards the whole country, like I just mentioned, Anganwadi, or the relief funds that the government releases. So the parameters are more or less the same. The touching the poorest of the poor is one parameter. Touching the people who are marginalized in the society due to whatever caste, color, creed, religion, anything. So there could be a parameter related to the students, giving some kind of a welfare programs for the worthy students who somehow cannot get into the mainstream education because of non-availability of funds or non-availability of infrastructure. So each of these plans, whether it is India, whether it is any country, these policies are designed keeping the larger public in mind and not the lesser public.
Mhm.
When I say lesser public, I mean privileged people. In India, I just read a report, Kanchan, that if people are earning around, on an average, somewhere around 25,000 rupees a month, a person is earning, that person is probably comes under the best 60 to 70% of this country. So the welfare program has to reach out to the people who really need it, and then they also have to see how is the effectiveness of the program. I mean, we have also heard about Bangladesh, Grameen Bank,
Mm.
that started as a welfare thought, and the way it has reached out to the masses, the poorer masses or the rural masses of Bangladesh. That's a case study, right?
Okay, then when we are talking about a responsible state and welfare, now the question arises is that this totally a responsibility of government, or this is a collaborative effort of people and government, then only a flourishing or a very colorful result comes when we talk about the welfare of the people. So how you look this into this concept? As collaborative, or
Well,
it's totally government's responsibility to dictate actually?
well, your question is really appreciated, Kanchan. My thinking is that government is for the people, by the people, and they are there because of people. So, of course, the government has to take a bigger responsibility in this, because government has the power to enforce, government has the funds to spend, government has the muscle to ensure that it happens. So government has to take a bigger lead into this as the captain. And when we talk about the public participation, then my experience, my observations is that public participation will come if people see the immediate benefits around them. So people in India talk about, we saw about demonetization has been discussed for so many years. Okay. People have to see the benefit of every social welfare program. Jan Dhan Yojana, okay, which actually translated into the small finances or NBFC kind of businesses in India. What is the effectiveness of it? So, do we have an account in a small finance bank? Do I go to a small finance bank today, or I go to the private banks? It starts with me. But government as the big brother or the overarching brother has to basically promote it as well. Okay, the gas subsidy, the petroleum subsidy that we saw recently, this has promoted well so that people participation can happen. Otherwise, this remains on few individuals like you and me to look at the participation, and we go out on the streets with our slogans of people's participation. But then we see there are no big takers, and this is also true in my experience. I saw African nations, Kanchan, as well. Since government is taking almost 90 to 95% of the lead, it's a very few participation in the African countries from the people side. But if you see on the other hand, on the Japan, where I spend a lot of time, people actually push the government to take those welfare programs to the larger public. So it all depends. It's a healthy balance. Hindi mein kahe to rassa kashi. Ek healthy balance is needed in that front. And of course, government cannot rest saying that the people are not participating.
Okay, well, when we are talking about the welfare and the responsible state, and this implies on Indian state as well, because we look forward and we are a kind of society where we always think and work towards welfare of the people. And I've seen it that not only in government aspect, but people by themselves, because that is a cultural aspect of, especially when we talk about Indian, and many countries may be following this also. Any last thought you would like to really tell to policymakers, that how really they can evolve in doing more welfare for the people?
Kanchan, policy makers around the world are the people who are able to feel the pulse of the nation, who are able to feel the pulse of the economy all across the world. What is happening in the Ukraine war, it has taken a very, very bad beating in the financial markets in the world. Petroleum prices and lot of funds that would have been actually moved for the social welfare of many nations are being diverted to buy petrol, are being diverted to have a weapon program. Now that money could have been used for a social welfare program, and I think the policy makers understand this very, very well. What they don't understand is that when to take a stand. So from an Indian perspective, the policymakers must not forget the pressing issues of our society, the sections of the society which are still marginalized, which are still do not have access to the basics, the water, the sanitation, the electricity, electrification, infrastructure, education, access to the capital, and entrepreneurial drive. Who pushes them? Who gives them the incubation? So the policy makers, a set of policy makers, very, very dedicated, must be thinking on those terms and should be able to convince the government to allocate the funds, and then should be able to see the execution plan happening. And that's the only mantra to success. But this is not a one-time mantra. It is an everyday chanting.
Well, we had quite an interesting discussion today, and I will just summarize is that though initiation is done by government, and I think there's a higher rate of collaboration which is needed by entrepreneur, by general public, to ensure the welfare of the society at large, right? So it was so interesting to really talk to you and understand. And I would request all the viewers to, if you have any opinion or any comment, please do write in, and we will facilitate your answers from Sitesh Srivastava. So Sitesh, it was wonderful talking to you, and we'll be meeting again. Till then, you just take care and have a good day.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
So friends, we had an interesting discussion with Mr. Sitesh Srivastava. We will be meeting again, and till then you please keep smiling, and if you have any opinion, please do write it, and we'll be meeting again. Till then, tune in to Unmissable Business Channel. See you. Bye bye.